In stories, a series can have all the right ingredients, the music, the fights, the animation, yet still fall short in the writing. Many fans consider Arcane as a masterpiece, though some admit that Season 2 has flaws. In reality, these issues have been present from the beginning. While some viewers might have missed or overlooked their impact, these problems have quietly shaped the story since Season 1. This video explores the flaws in Arcane's writing by explaining its shaky characterization, focus on conflict over character, and lack of meaningful consequences for major moments. These issues are shown in Powder's character. Her struggles stem from her mental health, abandonment issues, need for validation, and the label of being a jinx. These ideas are explored well in the first 3 episodes. For example, the glitch effect is present in the story's first scene. This is later associated with Jinx, which sets up Powder's trauma. Powder feels misunderstood and excluded, especially when Milo blames her for mistakes, making her believe she's a Jinx. But there's a disconnect in how these ideas are executed. To prove herself, Powder relies on her bombs, which consistently fail. This detail is intended to highlight her flaws, but it doesn't align with how her character's shown. Powder's actually too competent for this characterization to work, as she's established as an incredible shooter. Why does this inconsistency matter? Powder's goal is to prove her worth to the group, so it would make sense for her to rely on skills she's confident in, especially if she's seeking positive feedback. The issue isn't just that she's a good shot, it's that she's fully aware of her talent. She consistently beats Milo, the very person who bullies her.
Oh, what's the matter, Milo? You worried Powder's gonna beat you again?
This self-awareness makes it confusing that she places so much of her self-worth on bombs that repeatedly fail. Now, some might argue that Powder doesn't have the tools to use a gun in combat, or that doing so would be too dangerous. This simply isn't true. She has access to paintballs, as seen in the flashback during her bridge fight with Echo, where she uses them with confidence. This scene shows that Powder's capable with a gun, knows how to use it, and could contribute meaningfully to the group. Also, bombs would be more dangerous than her gun. That brings us to the moment Powder uses the crystals to save Vi in the game, which feels strange on a second watch. The show wants us to believe that Powder resorts to bombs to prove she's not a jinx, but this idea falls apart. Powder knows how explosive the crystals are. This is shown in episode 1, when some crystals destroy a building, and she's blamed for it, so she would be cautious about using it. Yet she decides to not use 1, but 3 crystals when saving her family. This goes to an almost cartoonish level of bad decisions. Powder's actions at this moment are extremely reckless, and the show fails to give us a good reason to empathize with her decision-making. She knows how dangerous the crystals are, and her happiness over the bomb working doesn't align with the devastation she knows it'll cause. This moment could have been better if Powder's desperation was an extension of her character. Instead, she recklessly endangers everyone with a bomb. I understand that she's emotionally unstable, but this could have been done better. She could have used other methods like blinding the enemy or making a distraction. Or the story could keep the bomb scene but add a new layer to Powder's character to justify her choice. For instance, make Powder insecure about her shooting skills. She practiced secretly away from the group, so it would make sense for her to rely on her bombs as her perceived strength. Vi could encourage her to show the group her shooting skills, but Powder, afraid of being seen as bad at something new, would reject the idea. This would not only make her dependence on bombs feel more believable, but also align with her insecurity and need for validation. They could even use an implicit option and have Powder pick the crystals over the paintballs, then have the audience connect the dots on what that means. This inconsistency even affects the group dynamics. If everyone, including Milo, knows Powder's a good shot, his bullying comes across as hateful, rather than a concern for success. Similarly, if the group genuinely cared about Powder and wanted their mission to succeed, they would have placed her in situations where her strengths, like her shooting, could shine. By failing to address these dynamics, the show makes the group's treatment of Powder feel out of touch, which distances the audience from empathizing with her struggles and make her actions feel dumb instead of unfortunate. This issue highlights something called conflict over character. In storytelling, conflict is the fuel, and characters are the devices through which the story is propelled. Strong storytelling ensures that the fuel, conflict, is suited to the device's design, the character. In other words, a character's traits, motivations, and flaws must align with the conflicts they face, the outcomes they experience, and their choices. The story feels organic when this is done well. Some writers add more conflict to the story instead of refining the character's traits to suit the situation better. While this keeps the story dramatic, it sacrifices internal consistency. With all the extra fuel, the device still moves forward, but it wobbles and breaks, losing what makes it work. This idea can be seen with Jayce. When we're introduced to him, he's defined by his dedication to research. His life revolves around it, to the point he risks everything to continue his experiments. Jayce and Victor even defy the Council's ruling on magic, showing how deeply he believes in the potential of hex tech. This tells us that pre-time skip, Jayce is ambitious and willing to push boundaries in the name of discovery. But after the time skip, Jayce feels like a completely different person. On Progress Day, when given a choice to show us the future of hex tech or give a safe, normal speech, he chooses a safer route. Suddenly, Jayce is shown as valuing caution and responsibility above all else. This is a complete 180 from the reckless, boundary-pushing researcher we initially were introduced to. It's possible the writers intended Jayce's shift toward caution to reflect the burden of leadership. Still, the story fails to develop this idea, leaving his actions to feel disconnected from his earlier characterization. Jayce's shift could work, but Arcane doesn't put in the necessary groundwork to make it believable. The story skips over the why. What happened in the years between the time skip to cause this drastic shift? Did Jayce reflect on the risks he took and decide to change his ways? Was he shaped by new responsibilities or pressure from the Piltover's elite? The story does attempt to show this, but fails. Heimerdinger has been pestering Jayce about these issues over the years, and Jayce has disagreed with him on multiple occasions. He even talks to Mel about his concerns, but ultimately he chooses to align more closely with Heimerdinger when pushed. His measured stance feels completely forgotten after Mel manipulates him into seeing her way. The result is Jayce's decisions and values feel disconnected, as though the writers themselves can't decide who Jayce really is. An argument can be made that this is the intention of Jayce's character. He's supposed to be malleable. If this were the case, Jayce shouldn't be making drastic decisions on his own, like talking about magic during his trial, suspending hex tech operations, investigating corruption, imposing a blockade, or striking a deal with Silka. These actions stem from his own motivations, and if he were so self-motivated, then it would be hard for others to influence him so easily. A clear example of this contradiction occurs when Mel walks out of Joyce's Progress Day speech after he refuses to go along with her wishes. Yet the next time they meet, she easily sways him on issues that shouldn't move someone as independently motivated as Jayce. This inconsistency makes it difficult to understand who Jayce truly is. A malleable pawn shaped by others, or self-motivated leader making independent choices. Jayce's inconsistency is just the beginning. The story could fix this by providing a clear motive for Jayce post-time skip. We could see that when the mage saved him as a child, it deeply inspired him to become a hero. This would explain why the new Jayce is so devoted to rooting out corruption. From his perspective, cracking down on corruption is a way of doing good and fulfilling his heroic dreams. However, this interpretation quickly falls apart when Mel convinces Jayce to side with corrupt council members for political progress. Why would Jayce, who has supposedly been determined to fight against corruption, suddenly betrays his defining goal? There's no strong reason for this change. The story doesn't show Jayce's thought process or internal conflict, which could explain the sudden shift. Instead, the writers simply change Jayce, as if his prior values never mattered. The issue becomes even more apparent when Mel asks Jayce to join the council. This scene's a mess for several reasons. Jayce suggests suspending the hex gates and all hex tech operations, including research, due to the stolen gemstone. This is wild coming from Jayce. Is this the same character? The same character who would break the rules and whose entire life revolved around research? This drastic change doesn't map to who we thought Jayce was. To make matters even worse, on an initial watch, you might assume the reason Jinx could steal the gemstone was due to Jayce irresponsibly leaving it behind after his speech. This would justify Jayce's guilt and drastic actions. He would take full responsibility for the theft, and he would feel compelled to make amends by demonstrating a willingness to suspend operations. But this is not what happened. Jinx somehow knew exactly where, how, and when to steal the gemstone and avoided security in the building. We realize this when her trademark graffiti is seen in the lab. This detail shifts the blame away from Jayce, making his drastic idea feel like an overreaction rather than a meaningful outcome of his actions. The person who should bear responsibility here is Marcus, not Jayce, since the lab's security failed. Jayce's inconsistencies don't stop there. The most baffling example of his erratic characterization is his decision to vote out Heimerdinger.
I believe it's time we gave the beloved founder of our city a well-deserved retirement.
Let's first consider some key facts about Heimerdinger. Heimerdinger is one of the founding members of Piltover, the father of progress and a pillar of stability within the council. He's the public face of Piltover's innovation, giving grand speeches on Progress Day. Much of the council respects him, not just for his role in shaping Piltover, but also because his steady hand has likely guided them through countless challenges. Heimerdinger is also why Jayce is even on the council, as they share a background as scientists. Given all of this, how can Jayce, a brand new council member who's been in Piltover's political sphere for no more than 2 weeks, suddenly gain enough political capital to challenge Heimerdinger, and then successfully vote him out? And not just vote him out. He somehow pushes for a unanimous vote with no real debate among the other council members. This moment's not only unlikely, it completely breaks the political conflict in Arcane. For one, Jayce is not a cunning politician or a master manipulator. He's presented as a concerned scientist with a newfound sense of responsibility. The other council members are given no clear motivation to side with Jayce, especially considering Heimerdinger's decades, if not 100 years of leadership. They should be cautious of Jayce. If someone this new is willing to oust the most senior respected members so quickly, what's to stop him from targeting them next? For a group of self-serving politicians, trusting someone as unpredictable as Jayce would be a massive gamble. Yet the show ignores this entirely. Heimerdinger, known for his wisdom and foresight, is uncharacteristically passive in the scene. Despite his deep experience and long-standing leadership, he offers no meaningful counter-arguments to Jayce's claims. This portrayal reduces him to a caricature of weakness, making Jayce's decision appear more justified. This entire sequence is supposedly driven by 2 key issues: the situation in Zaun and Heimerdinger's opposition to the Hex Core, but neither holds up under scrutiny from the perspective of the Council. First, the Zaun problem isn't solely Heimerdinger's responsibility. It's a collective failure of the Council. When Grayson updates the Council about the growing unrest in Zaun back in Episode 2, Heimerdinger isn't there, nor shown as the sole authority or decision-maker on the matter. The Council as a whole either ignored Zaun's plight or failed to take an effective action. So why does this suddenly become a personal failing that leads to removing Heimerdinger from power? Second, Heimerdinger's opposition to the Hex Core isn't unreasonable. In fact, it's entirely consistent with his character and role as a cautious scientist. While Heimerdinger initially expressed skepticism about Hex tech, he ultimately allowed Jayce and Victor to continue their research because they proved its safety and utility over time. The Hex Core, however, is a completely different story. Even Jayce and Victor don't fully understand what they're doing. They're tinkering blindly and hoping for the best. Heimerdinger's concerns about its dangers are valid, and the idea that Jayce would dismiss them so easily feels like another shift in his character. This brings us to the Council itself and how its members vote. One of the most glaring inconsistencies is Irius' decision to side with Jayce against Heimerdinger. Irius people were nearly destroyed by magic in the past. Given his history, Irius should be one of Heimerdinger's strongest supporters, as Heimerdinger's cautious approach to research aligns with Irius' interests in ensuring safeguards are in place to prevent similar problems. Instead, Irius oddly votes to oust Heimerdinger, siding with Jayce, a newcomer to the Council who has no track record of proven leadership, and who advocates for increasingly reckless actions. This vote directly contradicts Irius' implied priorities and undermines his character. The unanimous vote against Heimerdinger is the final nail in the coffin. The Council members' motivations are never explored, and the stakes of such a radical move are ignored. Heimerdinger's removal should have sent shockwaves through Piltover, creating tension and mistrust within the Council. Instead, the vote passes without much of an issue, which leaves the audience wondering how this makes sense. This is Arcane in a nutshell. We could spend more time dissecting Jayce's other inconsistencies, like how he suddenly becomes a fighter, or why enforcers are initially too afraid to enter Zaun but later follow Jayce there without question, but we have bigger fish to fry. Let's talk about Marcus. Marcus is one of the more frustrating characters in Arcane, since his motives and actions lack proper grounding. When we first meet Marcus, he's the second in command under Grayson. He has a deep hatred for the Undercity and wants its people punished. This drives him to meet with Silco. Wait, Silco wants to meet Marcus and provides information on Vander and potentially the culprits behind the Piltover robbery. Later, Silco backstabs Marcus, killing Grayson, several enforcers, and Benza. Marcus is outraged and says,
"Wasn't the deal?"
Silco, dismissive, explains,
"Deal's changed."
Fast forward to the time skip, and we learn that Marcus is still working with Silco and has even been promoted to sheriff. But if you think about this, none of it makes sense. What exactly was Marcus and Silco's deal? The show never clearly explains this. All we know is that Silco was acting as a tipster for Marcus, and apparently paying him off. But when Marcus mentions the deal, Silco throws him a bag of money, which could imply two possibilities. The money belonged to Marcus, meaning Marcus had paid Silco for information. Or Silco was paying Marcus in exchange for something. The first scenario doesn't work. In Episode 1, it's confirmed that Silco is bribing Marcus. As he says, we'll buy another after losing Marcus as a corrupt enforcer. This leaves the second scenario. Silco was paying Marcus off, but this deal makes no sense in context. The bribe would have been set before Silco's betrayal, which means Marcus accepted money from Silco before Grayson was killed. The deal could have been Marcus giving Vander to Silco, but why would Marcus have agreed to any deal? At this point, Marcus is second in command. He's not desperate for money, and his motivations thus far, hating the Undercity and wanting justice, doesn't align with accepting shady bribes from Silco. He should have immediately seen this as suspicious, since he doesn't trust Zaun. These issues become even more apparent when we examine the aftermath of Grayson's death. Silco somehow plans an ambush, kills Grayson, the sheriff at the time, and leaves Marcus as the only surviving enforcer. How does Marcus explain this to the Council? The Undercity's already drawn scrutiny from the Council due to the recent robbery and explosion. Surely, the murder of Piltover's top-ranking law enforcement official in the Undercity would trigger a full-scale retaliation. Yet there's no fallout from Grayson's death. How did Marcus justify coming back alive with no real explanation? How did he avoid blame, let alone get promoted to sheriff after such a colossal failure? How did he bring Vi for arrest under no charges? Marcus wasn't complicit in Grayson's death. He was double-crossed. Yet, instead of reporting Silco, he inexplicably continues working with him, accepting bribes and covering up crimes. For someone in Marcus's privileged position, this makes no sense. Even more confusing, Marcus has a daughter. Why would he put himself in such a dangerous and reckless position for bribes he doesn't need? Especially when Silco has already proven himself to be untrustworthy. None of this aligns with Marcus or Piltover's idea. Piltover's seen as wealthy and stable, and the enforcers should enjoy a comfortable life. On the other hand, Marcus risks his career and family for bribes.
Everyone makes mistakes, right?
While Arcane's often praised for its animation, music, and action, the writing consistently falls apart. From Powder's inconsistencies to Jayce's erratic decision-making and Marcus's nonsensical motivations, these elements stop Arcane from reaching its potential. The writing has countless smaller issues that couldn't fit into this script, like characters surviving things they should not, specifically Caitlyn and Echo on the bridge. Season 2 doubles down on many of these problems while introducing entirely new ones, creating an even messier story. In the next part, we'll examine how Season 2 amplifies these issues, introducing new flaws and complications as it struggles to piece the story together.